As we continue our week-long excursion through the national parks, How America's Best Idea is Meeting 21st Century Challenges, we are honored this morning to welcome Rue Mapp, a public lands champion, outdoor gear designer, and published author. Ms. Mapp is the founder and CEO of Where Black People and Nature Meet, Outdoor Afro. For more than a decade, the not-for-profit organization has continued to celebrate and inspire Black connections and leadership in nature across the United States. Her first national book, Nature Swagger, Stories and Visions of Black Joy in the Outdoors, was published by Chronicle Books in November 2022. In 2021, Ms. Mapp was recognized as an AFAR Travel Vanguard Award. Her many other recognitions include being a National Geographic 2019 Fellow, Heinz Awards honoree, and National Wildlife Federation Communication Award recipient, received alongside former President Bill Clinton. The White House also invited Ms. Mapp to participate in the America's Great Outdoors Conference, which led to her participation in the launch of former First Lady Michelle Obama's Let's Move initiative. It is our honor to host Ms. Mapp. It is our honor to host Ms. Mapp this morning on her first visit to Chautauqua, made possible by Week 7 presenting sponsor Erie Insurance and the Marjorie and Frank Sterrett Memorial Lectureship. This morning's lecture is titled Nature Swagger, Stories and Visions of Black Joy in the Outdoors, the title of Ms. Mapp's book. Please join me in offering a warm Chautauqua welcome to Rue Mapp.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, I love that, because I come from a call and response tradition, so I love hearing it back. And I just thank God for being here. You don't know what I went through to get here. I was in Atlanta travel jail for 2 nights, and it was cutting it really close. So I am so grateful to be here. Not only through the travel logistical issues, but also I'm so grateful to be here at such an historic and important place for, I believe, all speakers. And I just want to thank the Chautauqua Institute, and thank you, Mark, for such a generous introduction, and all of you for saying yes and coming here and spending this time. And I hope we have a good time together today. So a lot of people ask me, like, how did you start Outdoor Afro? So I'm going to walk you through how Outdoor Afro began, as well as a lot of the things I've had the blessing of learning throughout these years. So Outdoor Afro started really as a family affair. That's little Rue. My family were from the South. My dad was from Texas, my mom from Louisiana. And, okay, all right, some Louisiana and Texas here. And they moved to California, but they did not leave behind their love for the outdoors. And my father set up a family ranch about 100 miles north of Oakland, California, where our main house was. And that house was a site of exploration, celebration. I remember just being able to ride my bike along country roads, getting myself in a relationship with the local creek, seeing stars at night that I wasn't able to see in a light-polluted sky. But it was also a place of gathering, just like this place, a place of connection. And I had this front row seat of wonder, and wonder across generations. Air that was just so fresh and fragrant that people needed for their healing and their connection, living in very stressed urban environments. Back home in Oakland, I was a Girl Scout. And I also fell in love with journaling. And these are actually 2 pages from my Hello Kitty diary in my big new curly cursive, and I'm writing about how much I loved camping with the Girl Scouts. Now, mind you, my parents were outdoor folks. My father was a hunter and a fisherman, and I learned about those activities on the ranch, but nobody had the wherewithal to actually camp. It was seen as something other people might do. But I loved being with the Girl Scouts, and I got this, very important lesson about the power of being in an affinity group. And just being in an all-girls group was incredibly empowering, and it really just started this longer journey of exploring the outdoors. And I was an outward bound student, and outdoors became a very important part of my family's life. But in 2009, this is me and my 3 children, I found myself divorced, no longer married. I decided to go back to school and tend to a long neglected undergraduate degree. So we all went to college. And at the end of that education was 2009, and the economy was in pretty bad shape. And I had a mentor ask me a question that I think everyone should ask or answer, because I was trying to think about going to business school. She knew I had 3 kids, and she was wondering how I would even pull that off. And she says, if time and money were not an issue, what would you do? And literally, I opened my mouth, and my life fell out. I said, I'd probably start a website to reconnect Black people to the outdoors. So Outdoor Afro was born using a Google template just 2 weeks after that conversation. And it was really at this dawn of social media. And so right from my kitchen table, I was able to share the stories of growing up wild. And I realized that my story was not really unique. People were writing me back, tweeting me back, commenting on posts about their own family stories. And I recognized that we actually had a visual representation problem as well as a narrative problem, because all the people like me who thought that they were unicorns or they were the only ones who looked like them in outdoor spaces, when you put us all together, we were actually quite numerous. And a core audience emerged. And one of the things that I recognized in the outdoor industry and environmental fields, the focus was mostly on children, but Black women were the community amplifiers. They were somebody's mom, auntie, cousin. They had children in their charge who depended on them or who they had influence over. And so we were speaking in Outdoor Afro at a tenor that this Black woman could understand, who was much like myself. And soon I had the attention via social media, as you heard earlier, from the White House, and this is just a sample of the organizations that I was able to connect with and also learn from. And I started getting feedback from people like, this is great to have these great stories and show these wonderful pictures, but I want to actually get outside with people. Now, back then, it was kind of a big deal to actually post something on the internet and people take action. So that's exactly what I did. I decided to begin what would become the Outdoor Afro leadership team. And I was the first Outdoor Afro leader. And this is me getting some folks out into outdoor spaces right close to where they lived here at Lake Merritt, which is actually the oldest wildlife sanctuary in the country. And I was learning a lot about what it meant to really have and hold hospitality for people in the outdoors. And so I was able to partner for the capacity, for the knowledge, to really help people have not only rich experiences, but also educational ones in outdoors. So I turned again, after learning a lot about convening people, to social media and asked, who wants to be an Outdoor Afro leader? And a brave 12 people said yes. And again, this was all made up. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was learning as I went. And I decided to bring this group of people together with a lot of our partners to learn about conservation, policy, communication, how to use our voices on social media to continue to shift the narrative. And, I took the time to, not just grow rapidly, because sometimes there's a lot of, attraction to just getting bigger just to be bigger. But I knew there was a lot more I needed to learn. So I decided to just grow incrementally. And then we had a first doubling after a few years. And then we kept growing. And this is actually the year here where we actually became a 501c3. So you can see how professional we all look. And again, continuing to grow, it's just been a wonderful journey. And then COVID happened. And, and it was great, actually, for us, because we started in the digital domain. And so we turned to those skills, deployed those skills, and we call those who joined us that year our pandemic babies. And they continued on with us. And I also want to just take a moment to share this video so that you can hear from an Outdoor Afro volunteer what this experience means to them in their own words.
Get y'all to come in. Act like you love each other. Come on now. Oh, that's awesome.
Outdoor Afro is a national nonprofit organization that focuses on creating and fostering opportunities for Black leadership in the outdoors.
This is the Outdoor Afro Leadership Team Training and Summit, and it's a chance for Outdoor Afro leaders from around the country to learn what it takes to be a successful Outdoor Afro leader.
Outdoor Afro is important to me because the outdoor space is transformative.
One of the biggest issues in the outdoors is access and representation and inclusion. And I think a lot of Black people struggle with getting outside and feeling included when we get there.
So at this training, we have lectures on risk management, demonstration hikes, meditation as a way to weave mindfulness.
You have access through these leaders to all of this knowledge, and it really creates a safer space for you to feel like, I do belong in the outdoors. And yes, we do. One of the most important things that we focus on in Outdoor Afro is creating a sense of community. And it's not even a sense of community, you actually have that, you're a part of that. And I knew it when I left the leadership training, and I wanted to share that and bring that back to New Mexico. Simon's like, let's get all the way on the edge. Oh God. You get to know new people, and by the end, when you close it, you feel like you've known them forever. And you want to see them again, you want to go outside and play. Like, that's Outdoor Afro.
You say Afro, outdoor, Afro, outdoor, Afro. You say outdoor, you say Afro.
I find so much power in being a leader, and it just instills so much confidence. But at the same time, it's okay to be vulnerable in our communities and just kind of sharing our struggles, but growing together too. And it doesn't stop at the outdoors. It's so much more than that.
Outdoor Afro has become, for so many people, that place where you feel nurtured and affirmed, and you get to be all the parts of who you are. Because we all need connection, and that's what Outdoor Afro is. It lets people know that they're all right, and specifically, they're all right in nature.
Oh, here we go. Awesome. And I'm proud to say that that group, from that modest number of 12, when I was just trying to figure out what to do, has swollen to over 110 men and women in this year's class in 30 states and 60 cities around the country. And we're still learning, and we're still growing. And I'm just thankful for also the ways that these leaders, they do capstone events every year. So in this picture right here, They did 40 miles of the Appalachian Trail following in Harriet Tubman's footsteps. Thank you. And these volunteer leaders, just a few years back, they actually went to Tanzania on the continent of Africa and summited Mount Kilimanjaro. So it is so much more. Thank you. I'm proud of them too. And it's so much more than, getting people outside, but it's also modeling like who leads outside and who can be an expeditioner. So I had a chance to return to the capital W wilderness. Myself, over the years, I, did a lot of front country activities, but getting to like the back country is a little bit more rare and very special for me. And these are some friends of mine with Sierra Club, and we had if you can see the mountain range behind us, that's the Brooks Range. We were paddling the Achillik to the Arctic Ocean. And just after we got into camp, we had a visitor. Can you see? Oh, he's pixelated. Oh my God. Okay, well, it's a bear. It's a grizzly bear. And the thing about that experience, we were, absolutely in that bear's wild. It was a hard reset of my humanity. And I knew that that wild was one that we as humans were just merely passengers through, and that this bear's wild could have taken us. This bear could have enjoyed us for takeout that day. And that wild would continue to lumber on as if we'd never existed. And I know being in those wild spaces and getting reordered as a human has only made me better. But I thought a lot about what that wild, remote experience might mean to people who lived in cities who might never have the opportunity to visit a remote wilderness such as that one. And I recognize that there are a lot of commonalities between that wild place and the people who live there, who are facing pressures around food security, as well as pressures around housing and climate. And so I really, and this is a picture of some young guys in Oakland. They're part of a workforce development program called the Scraper Bike Kings. But this was their wild. And so I was really just much more committed to helping tell those stories of those wild places back home in a way that was relatable to people's everyday lives. And then I also became more and more educated about Black history in nature. There were some really significant moments in history when Black people had those signs that kept them from getting out into public lands or public pools. But even through that codified exclusion of getting into outdoor spaces, Black people still persisted. There are places like Martha's Vineyard, Oaks Bluff, Lake Ivanhoe, Lincoln Hills, places where people found their joy and their justice in outdoor experiences. And in those locations were guides and outfitters and hotels and restaurateurs, and it occurred to me that these were early contributors to the outdoor economy as we knew it. And so much of my work and the kind of organization that I form absolutely stands on the shoulders of that tenacity. But yes, indeed, we know that there have been bad things that have happened in the woods. We have a living generational memory of those folks who can recall the plaintive lyrics of Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit, blood on the trees and blood on the root. But we have the opportunity to, again, tell a new narrative and define our healing and transformation so that those memories of terror become more and more distant. And then, certainly we've been challenged over the last few years, People have taken to the streets, and this photo is actually from 2016 when Ferguson erupted, and people were taking to the streets. And I'll never forget, like, leaving my office, and I'm hearing the helicopters already overhead in Oakland. People were already boarding up their businesses with plywood. And I asked myself, I'm like, what am I to do in this moment as a Black woman leading a Black organization focused on getting people outside? And the answer came to me so clearly. You do nature, Rue. That is your lane. And so the next day, I got on the phone with our local Outdoor Afro leaders and some of our partners, and we organized our very first healing hike. And when we got into that nature, that redwood bowl where we began, I could just see and experience people's stress falling off of them. And not everybody thought the same thing, not everybody, we were all different ages, different generations, but when we got into that redwood bowl, we were one. And as we started, winding ourselves down into the trail, where there were no helicopters overhead, no police in riot gear, our footsteps and our laughter filled the forest. And as we got down to the stream at the bottom of that trail, I recognized that we were actually doing what Black people have always known they could do, and that is to lay down our burdens down by the riverside. And we've been doing healing hikes ever since, for any reason. Sometimes it's just for people to find healing through something they're going through personally, or maybe it's something societal, but that is now a part of our teaching journey for Outdoor Afro volunteers. And then we're also responding to the sad reality of Black children who are drowning at 6-7 times of their white peers, ages 5 through 17. And so we committed in 2009 to teach every child in our sphere of influence how to swim, because I know, thank you. Because I know, we all know that if a child doesn't know how to swim, they're not going to put a pole in a lazy lake. They're not going to ease into a tippy kayak, and they're certainly not going to care about the problem we face of plastics in our ocean. So, thank you. And this is what it looks like. It looks like families who can do more together. Knowing how to swim is absolutely a gateway drug, if you will, to nature. And seeing nature is very important to us. It's not about just traipsing through the woods, but we want to identify our birds, our plants, our trees, and be in relationship with these places, and to take the time to get to know them. And multi-generational experiences, similar to how I grew up, are so important. Having beginner hikes for families with small children so they can learn what to bring and how easy it can be. And it gives these families a new tool in their toolbox for what to do when they may have some family time together. And then we also have a policy cohort just to help people understand how the government works. I mean, we're not out advocating for any particular thing, but helping people to know that they can access their elected officials, who are often very happy to hear from us when we do our Hill Days. And then I hiked with Oprah, so I'll tell you all about that later. And I've also, in 2020, my father's passed many, many years, but I felt like this was part of the story that needed to be told, and so much of my work is a tribute to him. So I became a born-again hunter in 2020, and it's been a fantastic way for me to just be more responsible for my food that comes to the table. And like I did with Outdoor Afro, I brought some folks together to learn how to do the same, called the Black Heritage Hunt. So we've learned a lot over the years, as you've heard, and one of the things, of course, is relevancy, making sure that the experiences that we offer people really, make sense for their lives and that they're accessible in their lives. And then leadership, oh my goodness, like this idea that we've got to send our kids to the experts in order to learn about nature, we totally disrupted that and have really helped to restore outdoor leadership back to the home, just where I learned it. And then finally, this work is so much about a long view. It is about generational change. And I'm so thankful for the ways that since 2009, when I started this conversation, so much has changed. It's not necessarily a parade down Main Street or confetti falling from the sky moment. It's more quiet than that. It's that moment where you look up and you see people outside in proportion to their population and their opportunity, and it's no big deal. And yes, I have a clothing line for everybody, in collaboration with REI, so you can go online or any REI store. Wonderful, wonderful collection. And then my book, I'm so thankful that I'll have a chance to sign copies if you choose to buy them. And I'll just read just one small section as I close. While enthusiastically focused on Black American experiences, Nature's Swagger is a universal roadmap to discover the delights, joys, and possibilities of transformation for anyone through nature. You will discover the epiphanies of high adventure alongside meditations on love of a favorite place or person and poetic revelations about our wild foodways, how it can all work together, and by extension, how we can too. This book, as my father would describe it, is your standing invitation to reconnect with nature and write your own story and transform within it. Thank you. Thank you.
So, I don't think any of us can wait to hear the Oprah story. So I'm gonna start there. I actually read about that hike online, and there was actually my favorite quote from you was connected to that hike. And if I could read that, let's see. What you said was, "The power of nature allows people to just be. Not only do trees not know you're Black, but they don't care about the money in your wallet. The birds, they're going to sing no matter who you're voting for." So I'd like to hear more about that, and I think that was when you were hiking with Oprah that you said that.
Yeah, it was right before the pandemic, actually. I got this call on a Sunday morning while I was stirring a pot of grits, and I didn't know. It was a Chicago number, and they were talking really coded language about the boss was interested in doing something with me in nature. And I figured out pretty quickly it was Oprah because I knew she was due to come into town for her 2020 Vision Tour. And I just told them the story that I shared with you all today about the power of nature to heal. And so we actually did a healing hike with Oprah. And I took her to the same location where we had our very first healing hike in those redwoods. And she didn't want to leave. She was having such a great time. But I will say, as a little funny aside, she has like presidential style like security. So there were all these like security people like hiding behind trees in like REI clothes. It was so funny, the theater of security. But she's gracious. I mean, and she's exactly who she's always been. She hugged everybody. I didn't feel like I was seeing someone or interacting with someone who I hadn't gotten to know over the last 30 years. So it was a real treat.
So thinking about that, and that experience, and really that the focus on sort of uniting in nature, what is it about nature that has the power to unite us? And how do we harness that power to heal some of the deep divides in our nation, which you talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it, and that was the big epiphany in 2020 when, we were, going through what's called the racial reckoning, and I just doubled down on nature. I was like, the trees don't know that I'm black. The birds are gonna sing just the same for me as anybody else. The flowers are still gonna bloom, no matter how much money's in your account. And I think we can take the lesson from nature about how we are just beings and how we can possibly see each other with that same kind of connectedness, but neutrality. And so I'm, again, turning to nature for us to find connection, especially across the perceived differences that I feel, continue to be dangled in front of us to divide us.
So another favorite quote of yours I have is, a nature-informed way of life that is filled with both confidence and ease. You said that in referring to your upbringing in Northern California. I absolutely love that and want to hear more about how Outdoor Afro helps others develop confidence and ease in the outdoors.
Yeah, that's really the title of the book, Nature Swagger. Like, people ask me to describe what nature swagger is, and it's absolutely that ease. My parents, rest in heaven, they just worked with the seasons. We had gardens, we had just a way of life that was connected to the natural world. And I feel that most of us could benefit from having a greater connection to the natural world. It might be how you decide to eat, maybe in a more seasonal way, or just the ability to get out and enjoy and appreciate nature in all of its forms. And I really want to help people just feel confident that they can do that. And you don't have to be an expert in order to do it well.
That's great, and I know that in your book, Nature Swagger, photography, there's so much beautiful photography in there, and, how do you use photography and other visual arts, to support the mission of Outdoor Afro and to make the outdoors more accessible?
Yeah, we found out quite early that, I could get maybe 12 people out on an outdoor experience, but if I take a photo of that experience and share it with the world, then we've invited more people into that experience. And it's just a really compelling way to not only help shift the visual representation, but also to invite people. And so I feel like imagery is a way of extending that hospitality that I think is so important for people to know, oh yeah, I belong there. Here's someone who looks like me. I could be there too.
That's in the imagery, I see a lot of diversity in the imagery, and not just of, but diversity of activity. And, when you said that with Outdoor Afro, you don't want to just show peak adventures in the outdoors, like people hanging off the sides of mountains, which are basically all my selfies. What is it about the imagery that you want to show, that story that you want to tell through that imagery?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times people believe that they can't participate in outdoor activities because it has to be some big, expensive, endeavor. And also, when we did surveys about why people weren't getting outside in the early days, not knowing where to go and what to do, fears and perceptions, gear and equipment, but the number one reason was time. People just didn't feel that they had enough time to fit outdoor experiences into their already hectic schedules. And most busy working families, they have, 40-hour weeks, weekends or soccer games and fixing things around the house, go visit your grandparents. Sundays are a time of rest and worship. Some people don't have vacation time or bank of hours. They can just, disappear off the grid. And so having containable 2-hour experiences in nature was really important to us, because I found that just by making events more accessible from a time perspective, it allowed people to participate. And then when you think about those small chunks of nature, they're usually easier to achieve right in your own backyard. And so I'm a big fan of like the city park, the regional park, because they're very important resources in all of our communities. And a lot of people don't even know what wonderful resources they have right in their own backyard.
That's interesting, because we have a number of questions of people really wanting to know, just logistically, like how do you overcome those barriers? How do you get kids from the inner city into the outdoors? If you could just share some.
Yeah, I think that there's like I mentioned before, there's an attraction to like focus on the kids, but guess what? Kids are part of families. And so we are deliberately multi-generational, because what I have found over the years is if you know, let's say you take care of everything, transportation, gear and equipment, and you get that child into a nature experience, how are they going to get back again without you? So it's super important that families get the tools to know where to drive, where to go. Even though, you know, children can be great advocates for the activities that they like to do, once you actually involve the whole family and really invite families into the opportunity to be in nature together, it's an opportunity often for some profound connection, healing, but also the sustainability for people to do it over and over again.
You know, you spoke about your family in your remarks, and we have a question about your father, and I remember specifically you've talked about a phrase your father used, you have a standing invitation, meaning once invited, you're always welcome. And so I'd like you to talk more about your influence of your father, but also how does your group relate to kids without fathers, and how do you support them?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, my dad did have a saying, you have a standing invitation, as people were leaving the ranch. And it meant that, you know, you're not just welcome that one time, you're welcome all the time. And it was pretty insane, like how many people we could fit into that house and into that ranch. But there was always enough room, there was always enough food. It didn't matter if you called in advance, it didn't matter if you brought anything with you. And that's the spirit that I like to extend throughout Outdoor Afro. And what I love about Outdoor Afro, it's not just you know, about kids, as I mentioned before, but it's got the range of genders of leadership. And so that is one of the ways that we're role modeling, even for people who don't have maybe, you know, the traditional family. There are people in the Outdoor Afro Leadership Network, I believe, who are doing a fine job of role modeling what outdoor leadership and participation can look like.
That's great. And we have a question about how, if you have, this is Education Wednesday, as we mentioned in the beginning, so do you have any advice for teachers in nature-based programming to best promote an inclusive environment that welcomes all?
Sometimes all you need is an invitation. I mean, I think we make it much harder. I think and for me, it's also about relationships, you know, and I've said frequently that nothing really happens faster than the speed of relationships. And so if you can build trust in a relationship and combine that with a compelling invitation, it's almost always going to be yes. And for teachers, one of the most easy things that I've seen people do that could be really inspiring is the garden. Like, be a champion for your school to have a garden. You could even start a garden in your classroom, but that is like such a low-hanging fruit opportunity that doesn't require, you know, the field trips and the permission slips and all that stuff. And then there's also a lot of great community partners too. You know, Nature Bridge in the Bay Area and so many others around the country. So reach out to, you know, some of the heritage organizations that are often putting together programming to help more communities connect to nature as your technical partner, if you've got students who are ready for those experiences.
Thanks. You spoke in your remarks about over the 100 people you've trained as leaders in 30 states and 60 cities. And I'm just curious if you could tell us about some of those people that stand out to you and their stories and backgrounds and what brought them to Outdoor Afro.
Yeah, I would say like that has been the most satisfying experience to see people grow as leaders in their confidence, that they can get people into outdoor experiences. But it's been incredible to see how people have changed and been transformed themselves through that awakening, as well as healed. There was a woman, I do what's called office hours, like every quarter I just, have people sign up and you can talk to me for the 15 minutes. I want to stay in touch with the group even as it grows. And this woman, she says, Outdoor Afro saved my life. And I was like, well, what do you mean? She's like, I was going through postpartum depression. And to be able to put my attention on nature and community, it saved me. And so people are not only like the purveyors of nature as leaders, they're also the beneficiaries. And then there have been people who've been so inspired to like start their own businesses or go back to school. And a lot of people know my own story of changing my life with 3 small children in tow, who are no longer small, by the way. My oldest is 26, my daughter's 21, and my youngest is 20, and he's a U.S. Marine. And and I got married again. So.
That's great. I do want to remind us it is the National Park Week here, and so I'm not going to ask you what your favorite national park is unless you want to tell us, and we'd love to hear it. But I would love to also know, with the great diversity of units, the 425 units in the national park system, how do they relate to and support the work of Outdoor Afro?
Yeah, from the very beginning, we have had interpretation rangers come to the Outdoor Afro leadership team to talk about the importance of storytelling. And what we have found is that the national parks are the story of all of us. It's beautiful, iconic public lands, but it's the story of all peoples of this country. And the opportunity to tell those stories and to get people connected to a sense of heritage and history has been really compelling time and again. And I love the Golden Gate National Recreation Area because because it's, first of all, it's urban. And so you have so many users. It's so accessible. It's right in people's backyards. And there's also some pretty interesting Black American history in there as well.
Thinking about that history, who are some of the Black leaders in the outdoors that have inspired you?
Wow. Besides my dad, and you'll read about some of this in my book, but I've been rethinking about who is an outdoor leader over these years based on all the things that I've learned through Outdoor Afro. And I think about Harriet Tubman as the ultimate wilderness leader, getting people, she got people through the cover of night to freedom. And that to me is such an important metaphor for what this work is all about. It is about helping people to get free and heal.
So we want to delve a little bit more, a few questions about what is it specifically about nature that's healing?
Well, for me, nature is God, and when I am out in that openness, and also just to be clear, nature isn't somewhere over there. Nature it's in us. It is the breath that was once rain. It is the water coursing through our bodies. That is as affected by the lunar cycles as our waterways. And so I feel that nature, if you think about it, It is at hand for everyone. It's not over there, it is you. And so for me, the awareness of that and to be out in natural spaces helps me to remember that. And it gives me comfort as well as joy.
Thank you. And
I'm like, we're getting deep here.
yeah. Well, okay. So the next question takes it kind of from the spiritual back down to the practical. And so what are the sort of the most powerful skills that you've learned in the outdoors that you would recommend to the rest of us?
Well, aside from swimming, I think tenacity. I just did a summit a few weeks ago in the Sierra Buttes. It was over 8,500 feet, and I was with a group. And you know, sometimes you just, as I've learned throughout my life, you know, you have to learn to trust your feet. And it gets hard sometimes, right? When you're trying to make a summit and you feel like you can't go any further. But, you know, it was almost like a prayer, you know, just being thankful that I had the ability and just to commit to one step at a time. And it was through those many commitments that I was able to get to the top. And I think that's what nature continues to teach me about having patience, pacing, but also the tenacity to get where I want to go. And it doesn't have to be fast, but it just has to be one step at a time.
Again, addressing a very practical question, how do you teach black safety when, you know, for people who especially have experienced trauma or incidents in the outdoors that may keep them away?
Yeah, I mean, risk management is a really big part of the curriculum, and it's, you know, the helping people prepare adequately is really important. Like you've got needing to have the right shoes, or making sure people have enough water and things like that. But there's also still perceptions that bad things will happen to you in outdoor spaces. But I think the way we help people feel better is that they're in groups. And that's where people feel most comfortable when they're not quite sure to be out in a group, you know, even if it's, you know, 5 to 7 people, is incredibly reassuring. And also it's non-competitive, you know, so we don't leave anyone behind. If you're a slow hiker like I am, we will stay with you. So it really comes down to a lot of just practical planning and sharing information and just being present for people.
Great. So we have lots of people who have asked how they can partner with you, how they can participate, whether you're a church, a school, a community group. Maybe share a little bit about sort of how to...
Yeah, thank you. So generous. I always say you don't have to have an afro to be a part of Outdoor Afro. So everybody's welcome. So you're welcome to join us out in nature. If you know of someone who you think, or if you think could be an Outdoor Afro volunteer leader, our application opens up around late fall of every year for the following year's class. You can become a donor of Outdoor Afro because we make our experiences free. We want to take the barrier of I can't afford to go off the table. So we're using our funds to help with our swim program. We have so many people who want to take swim lessons, but we are finding a lack. After the pandemic, a lot of facilities have never gotten their footing back to bring back the swim instructors. So if you know of swim facilities with instructors who are insured and certified, please let us know, and we will do matchmaking from there. But those are some of the key ways, fun ways, that anybody can get involved with Outdoor Afro, and I welcome you to do so. So thank you for asking.
Yeah. So, question of, have you considered a healing hike with people across the political divide? And if so, what are your thoughts, and how might you manifest this connection?
Yes. And you know what? It's kind of happened organically because, as I mentioned, I got involved with hunting. So like I'm in the middle of nowhere with people who look different than me, who probably have a very different voting history than me. And I remember I was, having a really hard time, doing this deer hunt in the middle of Wyoming. And eventually I was successful. And in the moment of success, this big Viking guy, he like flashes this 1,000 megawatt smile, and we just hugged each other. And we were connected in that moment in a way like we'll always be. So like we're exchanging like holiday cards and things. I mean, it's those connections you make through what you and I were talking about earlier, those deep hanging out experiences where you're just with people in nature. And also when it comes to hunting or any other nature activity in the remote wild, there has to be trust, right? And so being with people in nature, it accelerates that trust, it accelerates that intimacy. And I feel like that's where we can begin to find those connections across our perceived differences. And so I'm thankful to be able to do work, especially in these times, that is an opening for people to come together across whatever those differences are, because nature doesn't care about them.
Thank you. And speaking of being out there, and you shared some great examples in your presentation, so what have been some of your favorite excursions and why?
I love river rafting. I did 21 miles on the American River about a week and a half with a group of women. Just being on the river and listening and being in the energy of the waves is really anything with the water. And then the week after that, I was in Maui and did some boogie boarding and some snorkeling. And so anything with water, I'm here for it.
We hope you get to our lake while you're here.
I hope so too.
I'm going to ask a question that somebody asked, but I think all parents who are nature lovers would ask is, have your children grown up to love the outdoors?
Absolutely. They just cannot borrow my gear. Because it comes back wrecked, or I'm like, what were you doing out there? No, they love. In fact, the sweetest text I got from my son, who's on leave right now, he texts me and he's like, Mom, send me like a couple of hike recommendations. I was like, yeah, it worked.
One thing you just mentioned briefly in your presentation that I'd love to know more of, because I'm one of those people who turns over half of their paycheck every month to REI. And I often spend time in the store in my neighborhood in Washington, D.C., and I loved walking in there, earlier this year and seeing Outdoor Afro branded clothing, which was like way nicer than a lot of the stuff that I remembered in there. So just want to know, how did that come about? And specifically, since the partnership you have with REI, but I know you have other partnerships with Cliff Bar and others, and
yes.
Sort of what is the role? How do you see those partnerships kind of supporting the work of Outdoor Afro?
Yeah, over the years, REI's partnership as well as other brands have really helped us to product test over the years. And one of the things I've always recognized is that you might be wearing like very expensive things, to get into outdoor experiences, but you can look like a dumpster fire. And so I was, feeling bereft of color and fit in clothing. And so I started a second organization, a company, a for-profit called Outdoor Afro Inc. in 2021. And I actually had approached REI about 4 years ago. I was like, you all know how to make clothes. I know how to, I know some really great insights that could be helpful to inform design. And I really wanted to lean into color and just fitting more bodies, right? And they said yes. And we launched that 22-piece hike collection last November. And our other partners are also really important, like Keen and Cliff Bar, because they help support the leadership team. The leaders who volunteer with us, they get outfitted from head to toe in our partner gear. So they're also mini ambassadors for those brands and able to just be more informed and share what they learn about gear and equipment with the people on their events. So it's worked out really well for us to have those types of partnerships. But we have a lot of not-for-profit partners as well who have been incredibly supportive, as well as helped to educate our network.
That's great. There's apparently a lot of people who live in cities, as I do, and who have questions about how do we really connect with cities, and how do we green our cities, create more outdoor opportunities in our cities, and you've mentioned 60 cities you're involved with, and how do we really magnify that?
I'm a big fan of trees, so if we can increase the canopy that covers our cities, it just helps make our cities more walkable and enjoyable for more people. But I also just love the neighborhood walk. I get out and I walk almost every day in my neighborhood, and you get to know your neighbors and just to observe the changes of the season, the flowers that are in bloom, is a really important way. I mean, and it counts, right? So people, again, it's not about going somewhere far away. You can have really compelling nature experiences right in your own neighborhood, and especially in your city. And also the cities have some incredible parks often. And so reaching out to your local parks, getting involved with those classes that they offer, or tours or other opportunities, which are often free, is a wonderful way to connect in and appreciate what your city has to offer.
That's great, thanks. A number of folks have asked about the role of allyship and collaboration and partnership, whether it's with the National Park Service or other groups. How do you go about making those successful, those partnerships?
We don't do this alone, that's for sure. So, and like I've mentioned before about relationships, like our partners are actually real people who have been with us, who've gotten to know us, who've helped us to grow. So I would not be able to do this or stand here today if it weren't for our partners. And for me, partners, I can swap out for friendship. So I'm always open for more friendship. So our partners they've been amazing. And I think it really begins with recognizing these are relationships.
So I'm going to end on a big picture question. You can take this any direction you want. But what is one question we might ask ourselves, or one action we might take as we depart this shared space today and return to our communities?
Mm-hmm. Be the standing invitation for someone in nature. Find whoever in your sphere of influence who's not connecting and invite them. And keep inviting them. I feel like anyone can be a leader in outdoor experiences. And so my invitation to you all is to be that leader.
Rue Mapp, thank you.
So generous.
Thank you.
So generous.
CHQ Assembly is made possible through the collaboration and innovation of Chautauqua institutions' full-time and part-time staff, seasonal staff, and many volunteers, as well as participants like you, whose engagement, gifts, and subscriptions sustain our mission.